While we were at MagicCon, the panel we went to, described in our previous video, was MTG Art, the GOATs. And each panelist went over their top 5 magic arts of all time.
Yeah.
And we wanted to do something like that, but more granular, like per set. And so, again, emulating what they were doing, we set forth the criteria we're going to judge things by, and they include...
So we decided to do technically good. So anything that we feel is just technically well-executed art.
Yes.
I'm not a professional art scholar. I want to just get that out of the way in case anybody was under that
I have
mistaken.
read so much about art history in the past 24 hours on the internet.
But, you know, I think I do, between the two of us, I was like, I think we have enough knowledge and taste to determine, like, this is a well-executed piece. Like, I can appreciate the skill that went into making this.
And then we were going to look at flavor. How well does it evoke the plane, the set, or the themes of the set, and that sort of thing.
Like, does this feel like it fits there? One of the pieces that they remember when they were looking in that panel, they were looking at a piece from Neon Kamigawa, and they had, you know, they were kind of going through those points of like, you know, this really illustrates the feeling of that set. So I was like, I like that. You know, how well do these pieces in this case, like, tell us about Murders at Karlov Manor? Does it evoke Ravnica, the set's theme? Does it feel like it belongs here at a glance? And then lastly, I was like, what could be our last thing? And I was like, you know, art should speak to us. Art makes us feel something. And whether that's something that makes us feel happy, sad, or, you know, literally anything besides the soul-crushing void within. So my first pick is Lost in the Maze. This is a piece that I have found myself coming back to over and over again. I've opened a couple of copies of this in draft. I have yet to run it once. I don't think I've ever picked it in draft, but every time I've opened it, like, I'll just pause and look at this for a while. And this is one for me that I think it is technically well done. I really enjoy the way this maze is laid out and the perspective we can see, the way the city is featured in the background, showing the city of Ravnica, and the use of light here in the water feature in the center. Also, I feel like this is a good representation of kind of the twists and turns that were meant to go on during this particular Ravnica setting, with this murder story. And then you kind of have the hedge maze thing, which always sort of makes me think of like The Shining.
Yeah.
So lots of things here to appreciate. That's why I picked this one. And then this makes me feel something. I'm not entirely sure what it is. I think maybe it's intrigue. But when I look at this, like, I want to keep looking at it. It's hard for me to look away. And it's one of those cards that, like, I've paused on in draft, and I'm like, I'm not going to play this. Why am I looking at this? I'm like, you just like the art. And that's okay. That's cool.
Do you want to be in it?
I kind of do. I mean, I'm a little concerned about this ghostly blue stuff that's going on, but it's probably fine.
The Orzhov got it under control, like, as long as you can pay. They'll take care of any complications.
I don't know if I can do that.
We went to MagicCon. We don't have money anymore.
Yeah, I'm broke. I'm done. I don't have anything else.
All right.
But yeah, that said, I'd go in there. Maybe that's a bad idea, but who cares?
That's what we're about.
Okay.
All right, so my first pick is Wojek Investigator. I actually don't know how it's pronounced exactly, but I've been saying Wojek. But I hadn't even seen this buy a box art until I was preparing for this episode. I was just scrolling through, and it's like the last thing in the Scryfall list. And I wasn't familiar with it. I was going to about to scroll by it, but it really just kind of caught my eye, and I zoomed in, and I began to really appreciate this. And I think the coolest thing about it is that it seems to use the language of maybe just photography, but I think cinema to convey some things. It has this narrow depth of field so that the bottom of her legs and feet are kind of blurred.
Okay, yeah.
All the distant buildings are kind of blurred in the pale or the lighter colors. And the tops of her wings are closer to us than than her feet and everything, so they shouldn't be blurred unless that's motion. So there's motion blur also in this art. And I think that all gives you this sense of this is one brief moment you're catching. Where your eye is first drawn is either to her face or to the feather, and you end up kind of going back and forth. And so you're kind of looking through the magnifying glass, which is a cool effect. And the feather's also the closest thing to us, which is sort of like us looking through the magnifying glass, even though we see her looking through it. So I just think this is really cool on a number of levels. She also, the vast majority, like the default for any character in something that's mass marketed is make them hot, right? We'll come back to that later.
Yes, we will.
But she actually seems to have some faint signs of actual age. Like she has a little gray in her hair, and it's real subtle, but she seems to have some real subtle like age lines. Yeah, I'm seeing that around her eyes. I'm like, aging can be hot, but it's not. But I like that this isn't like a Hollywood hot kind of portrayal. Like this feels real. In a way that I don't think we get to see super often, especially in fantasy art. Exactly. So because of all those reasons, I really like this piece. Yeah, I love the light and the reflection in the magnifying glass. Like I kind of my eye keeps getting sort of trapped in between those different circles. Yeah. That's very cool. And to that point, then the magnifying glass itself is a really cool design with all the swirls. And I think there are a few other devices in the set. There's a theme with these lenses upon lenses, kind of the steampunk lens design. Yeah. So it's not purely unique to this art, but it is really cool and nicely executed, and it has that metallic feel to it. You can tell what the different materials are in the picture. Yeah, I like the textures. The cups look like leather, that the magnifying glass is clearly like metal bronze, and I'm not sure exactly how they pulled all that off, but it works. Yeah. All right, so what's your next entry? Not that one. That one's coming back. We're coming back to that later. My next one is Deadly Cover Up. Now, this one's a very different style. I didn't intentionally try to pick different styles. Yeah. It just kind of happened that way. But this is a very different style compared to Lost in the Maze, which is kind of a more like realistic looking portrayal, just like realism landscape. It's straight fantasy art. Yeah, very straight. For what that means today. Yeah. But this one is a lot more stylized. Yeah. And on this one, I really like the use of color. I like the composition in this one with the figure looking at this apple that she's holding in her hand. We have this sort of... I didn't even... Yeah, so she's holding an apple there, and she's kind of transfixed in this almost tragic way. I love the expression on her face and the way we have the sort of mirror of these apples behind her coated in what look like kind of skull motifs with this purple... toxic... Yeah. Totally. So, like, this is one of those where, like, the more you look at it, there's so much going on. At a glance, it's just like, oh, that's pretty. Yeah. And then, like, kind of the more you look at it, like, oh, there's actually a lot going on here in the composition. So... those were all things that led me to choose this one. I think this has some kind of, we could get into like apple symbolism, the fruits, and kind of like the poisoned offering. Yeah. And this is a board wipe. So this is a board wipe. Mechanically, I guess the implication is tasty death fruits. Everyone's got to have one. But there's something about the look on her face that really grabs me here. I kind of love the like enraptured sorrow. Like she really... kind of looks like gelflings who have just been drained. Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, like, and we kind of have that where like it almost looks like her essence or her lifeblood is being extracted through the back of her body, because just the way that this is illustrated, this is coming out of her. It doesn't look like something that's necessarily going in. Like the lines of motion are drawn out. Yeah. So it very much does feel like she's losing something. Yeah, in whatever's happening here. And I love the use of colors, the sort of foggy gray background that they have with the purple and pinks in the foreground, and then she's kind of all blue and black with those little pink accents in her hair. I don't know if it's like jewelry or exactly what that is. Yeah. And then she's also wearing, it almost looks like Harlequin or like clown makeup. Rakdos seem overrepresented in the art in this set.
They do.
And I am guessing that's what that is.
That's kind of my assumption, but again, like, I don't know. But she is wearing some kind of dramatic makeup, it looks like.
Yeah.
So I love this for that. I don't know if I don't think I graded this one particularly high on flavor as being specifically Ravnican.
Yeah.
Or super evocative of the themes of this set. But I think it is technically well done, and it definitely made me feel things.
Yeah.
And it's another one of those for me that I think one of the things that I found as I was looking through these is anything that was like really hard for me to look away from.
Yeah.
Things that I looked at, kind of took in, and was easy for me to move my attention from.
Kind of a bad sign.
Kind of a bad sign. I mean, there were definitely...
When you're trying to choose the
yes, there were definitely some that I kind of came back to and appreciated more upon further review, but this is another one of those where, like, no, like, I was like, okay, you know, I've looked at this long enough, time to look at the next one, and I'm like, no, I'm gonna keep looking. Like, my eyes are gonna stay here for a little bit. We're just gonna keep following this pattern to see, like, what else is here.
Yeah.
And there's actually another one in this set that I very strongly considered, but I also by Sam Guay, Macabre Reconstruction.
Oh, yeah,
that was
totally
the other
sense.
one that I considered.
Yeah.
And it was kind of one of my like runner-up pieces, but between the two of them on side-by-side comparison, I decided that I liked the other one better.
Yeah. All right. So what's next on my list? Cold Case Cracker. This, I'm glad to have some commons represented here, because this is deep irony in Magic that the cards that are the most typically iconic, the most powerful, you see the most in a tournament setting, are the ones that you have to open 3 boxes to get 1 copy of. But you open a box of a set and you get like 4 of every common. And those ones, typically it seems like, you know, they just, they don't get as much attention. And I don't know if that's fair. It makes me sad. But this one, I really love. Your eye is drawn first to the top center where the light is. And so I just perceive a person looking at a bookshelf. Yeah, she's kind of blue, but like, this is Magic. We have blue people all over the place. Usually they're merfolk. I don't think twice about it. So I don't notice that, spoiler, she's a spirit. And then my eye goes from person just in a library doing research to these books and magnifying glass. And then I realize, oh, they're floating. And then my eye keeps going sort of clockwise around. Then I see that she's sort of transparent. And there are these extra pages to the left, which are, I guess, rustling away or something.
Yeah.
And at first, I think I just perceived this semi-corporeal form of hers at the base as part of those pages. But no, that's her being unsubstantial. And so just that journey is fun to me. And all of these pieces that you're noticing, the magnifying glass and everything, they are just perfectly of this particular set. Those are a library and Magic together for a mystery set in Magic. That's perfect.
Yeah, this one, I like that this has some of the symbolism that we see throughout the set. So like the book that she's looking at, it looks like it has that like Ravnican Investigation Bureau logo on it. And then we've got the magnifying glass with the multi-lens features again. She's wearing the badge with the same symbol from the book on there.
Oh, and she has like a monocle on her.
She's got some kind of
left eye
thing
that has the multiple lenses as well.
And, you know, something that I didn't think about when we were setting out our criteria, because it's not always the case, but I really like the story this tells between the art and the function of the card. So this creature, when it dies, you investigate.
Yeah.
And then the flavor text references being able to investigate one's own death. So I love the implication here.
Oh, yeah, that's fantastic.
That she is, in fact, investigating her own death or possible murder.
But also, I really like the texture of the hair.
I love that.
It's almost pages in the back, but hair in the front.
Yeah. I love the shapes her hair makes.
Yeah.
It is very reminiscent of paper, like rustling pages in the wind.
Books are neat.
This one is so cool. This was another one that I'm really happy to see that we had a lot of like I don't know if
Almost
we actually had any overlap, but
but we came really close.
But we did come pretty close.
All right. What's next on your list?
Oh, okay. So this one is Hide in Plain Sight. I'm feeling kind of bad now that I picked so many rares, but that wasn't intentional.
It was not a call out.
It was not a call out. But this is another one of those that I look at, and at first glance, I'm like, okay, this is... we see a lot of cards in Magic, especially ramp cards that featured like trees as a focal point. They're usually green. We'll usually see something like, oh, we've got like growth happening, something to kind of evoke that mechanical function. But I love how mysterious and frankly ominous this is, because at first glance you're looking through it and you're like, oh cool, more trees, and it's like, is that all that's happening here? So the longer you look at this, we have these glowing like eye spots hiding in plain sight amongst these twisted trees. I love how the shapes of the branches kind of suggest hands, or there's gesture in them that are not strictly just trees growing up toward the sun. This is also very shadowed. Yeah. Another thing that I like, that we're not seeing one of those pieces where it's a very straightforward, like lush growing foliage. We're ramping up our lands. Like this is in shadow. I don't know. Like, is this nighttime? Is this a location where these trees maybe don't get enough natural light, so we have a lot of these weird twisted shapes as they contort themselves, trying to make it toward the sun? Also, I'm finding more and more that I think I'm just really biased towards certain colors, like in art, because I'm like, oh, we have more purple accents. Wow, Julie, that's so original. I really like the purple accents. You've called out purple accents in like 3 pieces now. Good job.
They're neat.
But they're neat. So yeah, we have the eye spots. We have these little purple flowers down at the corners. That kind of connect the dots there. And this is another one that just, despite there not really being any action, this lacks the movement that we saw in the previous piece. It doesn't have that sense of cinematic motion. Like, this is very just head on. We're looking at a scene, but there is something still really powerful and captivating in this for me, where it's very hard for me to look away.
It's looking at you.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm kind of looking into the abyss here, but...
On to the next one?
Yes.
Crime Novelist.
I love this one.
This one is just joy personified. So there is one
I just saw something I've never seen here. This is amazing.
Because we're zooming in on it and looking at it much larger here. So your eye is drawn to the brightest point, right? And so you just see this happy little person who's a goblin. This happy little goblin who is just, it's just joy on their face. When I looked at this, I thought back to like the mid-90s when I first got a copy of Warcraft 2, the real-time strategy game, and the first time in my life where I'm just playing and thinking one more level, and I look up and the sun's come up, and I literally stayed up all night without realizing it. Oopsies. And I thought, this person is doing that. They're so into what they're doing. And the scale of everything here is just comedic, because the chair is way too big for them. The feather pin is like twice as tall as their head. The glasses.
I love the way they're holding on to it too.
Well, that was like the second level observation. They're holding it in a way that looks like they don't really know what they're doing, and they're writing in red ink, and everything else is in black ink. So I think this may not actually be the person who usually writes here, which.
That adds so much more to this. I didn't even consider that. I love that.
And then, who's the visitor you spotted there?
There is a homunculus who looks an awful lot like Flibblethip.
Yeah, it's got to be Flibblethip.
Underneath the desk. And I did not see that at all until we zoomed in on this. This is amazing.
This is not the densest of all arts in terms of having hidden things, but Flibblethip is there, and then like the skull that's the large one here on the left has little pointy teeth in it.
Yes.
So it's not a human skull. It's just that's a little fun nuance. But
yes, I love the observation that the goblin is writing in red, which I didn't even notice at first, and that kind of adds an element to like. The novel they're writing is the crime. Like, they're they've stolen someone else's work and they're committing a crime right
I like
now.
all of these.
Yeah, there's so many
possibilities.
layers. Yeah, like
but just that tongue sticking up and just that expression. It's
I love this expression. This was what nobody got to see when I was making my Zozu the Punisher deck. Like this was me on my floor putting together the cards that were to become a war crime I would share with my friends. You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks. All right, what have you got next?
Oh, I picked a mythic. Good for me. So this is Undergrowth Recon. This is one that, oh my gosh, this was another one where I just kept looking at more things. So like if you zoom in on this one, at first glance, we have a human figure who is holding what looks like some kind of steampunk camera device. It's pointed straight at the viewer, so very confrontational. And then like the longer you look at this, you see all these cool reflections, like center focal point of the camera. Like we have this whole scene playing out here. We're like, oh, this is what they're looking at. Up in the next one up, we see another reflection of what looks like kind of the same thing. And then like a little bit more, it's like you can't even really make it out, but I feel like the shapes kind of evoke the sense of that in the one right behind it. Like we're just kind of like each one is a little bit farther removed in terms of like blurriness and like that we're not meant to focus there. But then we have this person's eye, super sharp detail. They've got a scar on their face. They've got these little bandages on their fingers. Like,
oh, I didn't notice those.
Yeah, like we have this kind of rugged person taking photos. Who are they taking photos of? Like, there's so many questions this draws up for me, because like I don't know who this character is meant to be, but I'm just like very intrigued by everything going on here. And again, love the colors. We've got more of this pinkish purple, this fuchsia accent happening.
But this is so evocative of mystery,
it
right?
Is.
Like you've got
this
the private
feels like
eye
such
or,
a mystery. Like, is this person a private eye? Is this like a paparazzi kind of character? Like, who is this person? They're hiding in some. We've got the leaves around them. Like they're hiding in the bushes, taking this photo. And then we can't really see who they're focused on, but there's
maybe
some figures.
They're hiding in plain sight.
Perhaps.
This is what we can't make out there.
Perhaps maybe the pink that's the purple that we're seeing in the other frame.
Maybe a little bit of reach, but
maybe, who knows? But like that's part of the fun of this, right? Is that like we kind of get to tell our own stories in our heads when we're playing these cards and like, oh, are these connected? What's going on here? But yeah, we have them like surveilling this scene. We can clearly see the city in that lens. Yeah. There's figures there. Are they looking for someone specific? Is the target of their investigation in the frame? We don't really know. But yeah, this one for me was like one of the most flavorful pieces, I think, that I chose. I think it's really technically well done. I think this is a Ryan Pancoast piece. Yeah.
You are.
Just absolutely beautiful. Like, love the detail. Like, so much detail on the hands and face that, like, did he have to do that? No, but he did. And I really, really appreciate it. As far as what I think, again, most of these, like, the feeling I was kind of going for was, like, do I feel intrigued? Do I feel, like, drawn into the suspense of this set?
Yeah.
Absolutely with this one. Like, this one hit all the notes for me where I was like, yes, 100%.
All right. Private Eye.
I love this one.
Yeah, like on first glance, it's taken me a bit of time to figure out what it is that makes this stand out to me from all the others, because on a surface level, it doesn't seem that unique as a Magic card. Mm-hmm. And I still don't know the right words for it, but it reminds me, if the kind of center of gravity of good Magic art is neoclassical, realistic, exaggerated, emotional, this looks older. This looks Renaissance, or like Hieronymus Bosch.
Okay.
And not entirely, because I did a lot of comparisons side by side to try and figure out what I was landing on, but it's sort of in between. It's like the perspective is intentionally done slightly wrong or something, and there's something about the texture of the skin
Yeah,
And
I see. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
and the pose is sort of extra exaggerated. Like the arm holding the magnifying glass is a bit too proper, and it's very posed.
Yeah,
and it also seems to be sort of elevating. It's extremely Azorius.
Yeah,
which, I mean, it is an Azorius color combination, but it's
nailed it.
yeah, and so it's kind of elevating intellectualism, study, but in a very cool and aloof way. It just seems to really capture the essence of that. And it's a homunculus, and we have seen at least Fibblethip on the regular basis, and Fibblethip just doesn't look like this.
Yeah.
And there's been at least one other homunculus card, and there seems to be a homunculus character design established for Ravnica, and it's not exactly this. So that's another way in which this is sort of like, in Renaissance art, they sort of reinterpreted people's shapes in a consistent way that was close but not quite right. And this just feels like that same kind of thing. And it feels very deliberate. It doesn't feel like
like this is a choice. This is not a situation of someone who like, oh, like I don't 100% understand anatomy and I'm going to draw the arms this way. Like this feels very intentional.
Yeah.
I'm trying to dig up the word in my brain. It's not mannerism, but like that was an art movement where they had these very exaggerated, intentionally exaggerated gestures and bodies. Yeah. And it does have that sort of Renaissance feel of like, this is a tableau that we're looking at. It is not so, it's unlike the first one that we talked about with the angel. Yeah. Like this is not a cinematic point in time. Like this could be a photograph. Like this is a point in time where we're seeing like her in motion.
Right, the investigator
is a carefully thought out portrait of this character. Yeah. And like I need to find the right way to explain these things, but
you're already doing a lot better than I was, so I'm very glad that you're seeing what I was seeing.
But yeah, this is one of those things where like there's a couple other pieces, and Vulcan Baga, who we've talked about before, he does this really, really well with his portraits of legendary characters and non-legendary characters, just anything that features like a central figure. Where the best way that I can describe it is like, I don't feel like we're actually meant to feel like this is a specific point in time. Like if you look at Edric, Spymaster of Trust specifically, he is surrounded by all these little objects, all this symbolism. Oh, yes. And like, this is not, I don't feel like this is ever, like we're not meant to believe that this was ever a candid picture of Edric. Like this is not what his office looks like.
Oh, that's exactly the same.
But this is an imagining of like all of these artifacts, all of these symbols and objects that are surrounding him and telling us a story about who he is. Yeah. Not that any of these things have ever been in the same space ever. Yeah. But these are all things to tell us about the character. And like, that's kind of what I get from this little homunculus in a less, we don't have as much stuff going on, but like, it does feel extremely Azorius. I don't know if this is a traditional piece or not, but it feels like an oil painting looking at it. Like texturally, this looks like it has the feeling of an oil painting. But lastly, and they allude to this in the flavor text, I love how intent he is on studying that face, that basically mundane face. And he is just transfixed on that object and confirming, it's a base. It sure is. And just like the focus in his eye is...
We're not going to top that. We're not going to top that. Let's move on to your next one.
Okay, let's keep going. Oh, hey, look, I finally chose an uncommon. That's so...
Why did you choose it?
Why did I choose this one? So this was another one that I almost went past, and then I spent some time. I think for me, this one was the portrayal of the hands and the gesture. So we have a lot of detectives in this set. A lot of the creatures we chose today are detective types. This one looks like they're investigating a homicide, judging from the limp-wristed creature that they're investigating. Yeah. And I just love this one kind of has, it's less kinetic, it's less energetic than the Angel. Mm-hmm. But this, again, to me, feels kind of cinematic. This feels like the Ravnica sort of like primetime procedural crime drama.
Oh, it absolutely does. Yep.
So this, for me, was a big flavor. Again, we have all of these we're revisiting these sort of steampunk elements with the gauntlets that this person is wearing, or this merfolk is wearing. Merfolk people.
Yeah.
We can call them merperson.
Yeah.
They're using something, it looks like, I imagined this as they're using something to check for like prints or some kind of latent evidence on the body, because they have this green object that's spewing gas of some kind into the scene they're investigating. Mm-hmm. And then on their opposite arm, they've got like what looks like a little like light, like a really complicated light.
Yeah.
They probably could have just brought a book light. Maybe that is a book light. I don't know. But I love that. Like, this to me, it feels like I'm kind of intruding on a moment that I'm not necessarily supposed to see in that very like prime time procedural crime drama where they get like really up close and personal with the evidence and the bodies and stuff.
Yeah.
And I love the light in this one, like the light that's kind of casting down on the forehead and over the scene, and then we get like a nice little shadow here toward the bottom, which really highlights the difference in. They really, really detailed the hands in this one. Like if you look at the central figure of the merfolk's clothes, very, very fuzzy. Very, we don't have that level of detail. The top half, yes, but like the bottom, like, the behind the hands, real fuzzy. Just the suggestion of fabric, basically.
Yeah. I don't like fuzzy because it's not really blurred. It's just simple, very simple.
Extremely simple, like real light on detail, just fluid. Yeah. Like we did not, top half, very detailed.
That's fascinating. And it was so successful, but I never looked there.
Yeah. And I don't think you're meant to.
Yeah.
So yeah, we have like all this detail on the arms, the top half of the garment. You can see the little detective badge up here. The jewelry on the ear, all of this stuff. So much detail. And then we get toward the bottom, and just like basically nothing toward the back there on this character's clothing. And you're not meant to. And then like look at the hands. Like look how much detail is in the hands and the gesture, both of the merfolk and the corpse they're looking at.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's a really nice technical execution where like you didn't even notice how little detail is behind that because you're not meant to look there.
Yeah.
So
it's not only that it's not necessary, it's that not putting the detail helps draw your attention where it's supposed
exactly.
to be. That's
like
amazing.
Everything isn't supposed to be hyper detailed all the time. And if it's done really well, I don't think you ever really think about it.
Yeah.
That's one of those kind of fourth wall breaking things where like the more you think about it, it kind of takes you out of the experience.
This is another comprehensive package win for flavor in that this card collects evidence every turn, and that's what we're drawn to is like you said, it's all about this moment of actually collecting evidence, and we might have phrased it differently. It's very much that. Yeah. That's what this card does.
Yeah, this is another really good illustration where the art really ties into the function of the card. I think sometimes we get these fantastic pieces that are very visually striking, but they're not always the most tied into what the card does.
Yeah.
And that doesn't have to be the case all the time, but like this is really nice, especially like at the uncommon level. Yeah. Like it really grabs you because, again, like you said, these are not the cards that are necessarily going to get the most attention. So when you're flipping through a pack, you're like, oh, what does this do? And this kind of leads you straight into the function of the card. Like, we're going to collect evidence.
Yeah.
We're going to do it every combat. Or is it just your combat? I don't know. We're going to do it more than once. It's not just like an ETB thing and then we're done.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, very, very love this card.
Yeah. All right. What do I have next?
Oh,
Warleader's
this one
Call.
is so beautiful.
This one really stands out because it's an art style that I don't think is really represented anywhere else in this set. And at first, that's what drew my eye to it.
Okay.
Plus, it's just a bomb in limited, and that's what I'm a junkie for. So it's already on my radar.
Yeah, we played this, and it was great.
yeah, and our two-headed giant, right?
Yes, we did.
Yeah. And I had it in one of my Chicago drafts. It was, I like this card.
Real solid.
I like this on every level. But when I really started looking at it, this is a propaganda poster.
Yeah.
It's really cool in that way. It's the goal, I think, being to simultaneously say our side is right and just, and we're going to win, and we're overpowering, and obviously we're going to win. But at the same time, it also has to convince you, oh my God, there are these dark forces arrayed against us, and they're going to win.
Yeah, like the danger has to feel real.
There has to be a real call to action, but also enough like overblown sense of self that obviously and those are really mutually contradictory, but it does both.
This is so interesting. I like looking at it in detail. Like
so Aurelia is the main character, right? And her head is thrown back at this crazy angle, which at first I thought, wow, this artist does not know how anatomy works. But obviously, looking at the rest of it, they do. And I haven't even looked at who the artist is, and they've probably done a ton of other art. But so this is obviously a deliberate decision. And so I think it either conveys that she's possibly being defeated, or at least, struck a major blow. But at the same time, she's holding up her sword in this triumphant way. So it's very martyr-like. She's doing this heroic act and possibly sacrificing herself and defeating Rakdos, who is this enormous, overbearing figure. And then, so there is the image up top, which is Aurelia versus Rakdos, engaging in that, but then her hair fades from hair into this smoke, and the city's on fire because clearly there's this big threat, and the kind of main focus of the lower half is a war about to happen between the highly organized Boros Legion and this real disorganized Rakdos throng, who are clearly not taking things seriously, but they're also really a threat. I mean, some of them are menacing, some of them are just comical. There's this really conniving one in the shadows toward the right side of the image. And then there's this bit toward the left side, sort of her left wing, which to me, it sort of looks like fighter jets, which I think
I see those shapes,
and those don't go in that world, but I feel like that's really just a way to draw in us as people who have experienced our real world and recognize that pattern from propaganda posters. I think it just kind of evokes that. And there's also the other bit of sort of dual imagery. Between Aurelia and Rakdos, we see these buildings. It's the skyline of Ravnica, and the ones in the centermost are sort of fading into the upraised Boros fist.
Yeah, I see that. Oh, that's cool.
So there's all these layers of things going on in this image, and I think I've hit on most of the high points I noticed, but it's really cool and layered. And there is the kind of just the cool geometric things going on where the sword is emitting these kind of rectangular sparks, and Rakdos has this, I guess it feels like it's an explosion, but it's drawn in these strips, and it's all so visually cool.
Yeah, this is incredible. I love seeing I love seeing the contrast too in like the right and left sides, where the left side behind the Legion, you have those very like square topped buildings that we kind of associate with their
upright Boros.
Exactly. And then like left or right side, we've got all these really tall, pointy spires.
Sinister.
Yeah, these sinister spires. But I also kind of like the sometimes I think in propaganda posters, we kind of see this interesting thing of like the thing that's being portrayed as the upright, upstanding. We have this very orderly Boros Legion.
Yeah.
And they pretty much all look the same, which is clearly something they value.
Right.
And then we've got like everybody that I can see on the Rakdos side has an individual face.
Yeah.
Like very distinct.
Yep.
Different individuality. versus this very homogenous.
Yeah.
Like, we have some differences, but like these guys are all pretty, you know, they're in uniform.
Yeah.
They're part of the...
And I think that's the next layer. That's the thing we're supposed to start thinking about. Who's really the good guy here?
Right, like...
And, look, I'm not going to actually defend Rakdos because they're obviously terrible, but also they're kind of cool. But like,
they're also kind of neat. Like,
yeah.
Yeah, this is such a cool piece. I love this. And what a cool card. Like, I had so much fun playing this in our two-headed giant game.
Yeah. All right.
Oh, now we get to my honorable mentions. So there were a couple pieces that I kind of got stuck on, but I realized it's because the central characters are really attractive. And it doesn't, you know, like, no shade whatsoever to the art. These are just things that didn't make my top 5. I think they're both amazing. Yeah. I want to say that right now. So the first one, the first one is the Clandestine Meddler, which is a card that has been bothering me since it was spoiled. So this card came out, or I saw it, and I was like, oh, I need to find a deck to put this in. And then I read it, and I was like, okay, that's cool, that's neat. You know, it's a little lackluster for, like, Commander, but, like, I have a lot of black decks. I could find a home for this.
Yep.
I could do it. And I kept working on that, and I was like, why are you so fixated on trying to play this card? Like, you really seem like you're trying to shoehorn it in there. And I was like, oh, it's because he's hot. Yeah, that's the whole reason. So maybe I just need to build a deck for that card instead of trying to shoehorn it into one of my other decks.
Maybe you need to build a deck on that theme.
Just
put it in Yawgmoth.
I could do that. And then we also have Judith Carnage Connoisseur, specifically the Dossier Showcase version, which is another one where I was really hung up on, like, I should include this in my top 5. And then, like, as I was like, okay, well, like, what are the notes that we want to hit about this? And I was like, well, it's pretty. Like, yes, it's pretty. We're going to need to elaborate a little bit more. I think you can do better than that. And then, you know, like, you know, I mean, she's come on, like, she's staring. This is one of those pieces where, like, I feel kind of bad for how much I like it because it feels like it's pandering to me a little bit, and that, like, she's, you know, kind of a little bit pouty, sort of looking straight at the viewer. There's a little bit...
That's very in character for her. Like,
it is. It's so in character.
She knows exactly what she's doing, and she is fine with everything.
She's totally fine with it.
She's fine with all of this. Everything we're saying right now, this is...
I just feel... I feel like
You've been manipulated.
I have been manipulated, and I know it, and I'm letting it happen.
And she's just smiling about it.
And she's smiling about it.
Yeah. So I guess that's all of our cards. I also had a runners-up folder, but it's very large, and maybe I'll flash it on the screen very briefly.
That is a lot more pieces than I was expecting.
So I'm not gonna...
But hey, I recognize a couple of my picks.
Mm-hmm.
I like to see that we have some, and I see a few that I strongly considered as well.
Yeah. So actually, I'm very curious, any viewers, what the contrasting opinions might be, or if you agree with us on any of these.
Yeah.
Okay.
So tell us what y'all think.